In the early 20th century, Ireland was a country full of conflict. Just before April 1916, Ireland was a dominion of Britain and had little independence. In 1918, the Sinn Féin group, an Irish political party, won the national election, giving Irish control of the government. This set the stage for a violent war for independence from the British. The Irish Republican Army was formed, and for years guerrilla fighting and assassinations ensued. On July 11, 1919, the British had had enough and called for a ceasefire and negotiations with the Irish. An Irish general named Michael Collins and the stand-in president of Sinn Féin, Arthur Griffith, went to London to decide Ireland's fate. The negotiations resulted in the Anglo-Irish Treaty. Little did anyone know the treaty would tear Ireland apart. Collins and Griffith returned to Ireland, where they met with the Sinn Féin party to discuss the treaty. The treaty would give full independence to 26 of Ireland's 32 counties, remove the RIC, and declare Ireland as the Irish Free State. Eamon de Valera, the president of Sinn Féin, believed that Ireland would not have enough independence, while Collins thought that the new Irish Free State would be the first step to full independence. In an interview we conducted with Irish Civil War expert Paul Walsh, he said, "The vote on the Dáil on accepting or rejecting the Anglo-Irish Treaty was close, 64 to 57. But this did not represent public opinion in Ireland, which was strongly in favor of accepting the treaty. The Irish people had done enough fighting and wanted it to end." This did not stop Valera from splitting the party and taking his side to continue the fight for freedom. Two sides had emerged: the Free Staters, a pro-treaty side backed by the British and head of the Provisional Government, and the Republicans, an anti-treaty side who had no political backing. The descent into civil war had begun. On April 14th, anti-treaty forces led by Rory O'Connor captured the Four Courts in Dublin, the building that holds the highest courts in Ireland. This resulted in a tense standoff between the IRA and the Provisional Government. Michael Collins, the head of the Provisional Government's army, tried to convince the anti-treaty IRA to leave for months to no avail. The British became fed up with the lack of progress and began to threaten Collins, saying that if he did not act, they would retake Ireland. On June 27th, the anti-treaty IRA was given an ultimatum: leave or be removed. On June 28th, Collins led the bombardment of the Four Courts with artillery provided by Winston Churchill. Many of the offending Republicans were arrested. Some were released on the condition that they would no longer incite violence among the Irish. One was Liam Lynch, next in command to O'Connor, who did not follow through on what he was asked to do. Many expected this to be the end of the fighting, but in reality it had only just begun. The anti-treaty Republican forces did not back down after taking a big hit in the Battle of Dublin. They continued to fight back. This began a long campaign known as the Free State Offensive. The Irish Free State Offensive was made up of multiple significant battles taking place mostly in the Munster Republic, the name of the territory the Republicans controlled. The first of these battles took place in the counties between Limerick and Waterford. The county of Limerick was the gateway to controlling the south and west of Ireland. Comparing the armies was like night and day. The Free State Army was well-organized, well-armed, well-funded, and led by capable leaders. On the other hand, the anti-treaty forces were not as disciplined, and units did not coordinate well with each other. Limerick was taken quickly by provisional forces, and the anti-treaty side lost its geographical advantage. After the Free State Army controlled Limerick, they targeted Waterford, the strategic location of East Ireland. As they ambushed the unorganized anti-treaty forces, General Paddy Paul tried to take over the area, but was unsuccessful in doing so, and Republican reinforcements had arrived. Paul and his men were outnumbered, but still managed to push the Republican forces out of Waterford. The Free State Army kept up their assault, advancing through Munster, but were stopped at the county of Kilmallock. 1,500 Free State soldiers were confronted by 2,000 anti-treaty troops led by Liam Deasy. The Free State marched towards the towns of Bruff and Bree, capturing them both. Liam Deasy and his forces mounted a counter-offensive to take Bruff and Bree back, but they were stopped at Bree. The Republican forces fled from Kilmallock after the Free State reinforcements arrived, growing their army by 3,000 men. Then the Free State Army marched towards Cork, the capital of the Munster Republic. The army took Cork without much difficulty, and the Republic was severely weakened. It became apparent with the support from the British the Provisional Government was too strong for the Republicans to fight head-on, so they were forced to begin a guerrilla campaign. Liam Lynch was looked down upon by some Republicans for allowing the war to reach this point. The guerrilla attacks yielded mediocre results, only capturing back a few towns, including parts of Cork. However, one of the most tragic deaths would come out of Lynch's guerrilla campaign. Michael Collins had been inspecting the counties the Free State captured, and was planning on going to Cork. Many advisors warned him to stay away as Republicans were still in parts of Cork, but he ignored the warnings and assured them everything would be all right. Michael Collins was killed when his convoy was ambushed at Beal-na-Bluff. At his funeral, 500,000 people were in attendance. Both sides of the conflict grieved. To the British, Collins was a liked and respected ally, and to the Irish, even to those whom he opposed. He was a great friend who was tragically lost. He had been looking for ways to mend the rift between the two sides from the start of the war until his death. And when he was killed, the attempts to reach a compromise vanished, and the intensity in the conflict grew. Without Collins, even the thought of peace could not exist. He truly wanted a united Ireland. 10 days before the death of Collins, Arthur Griffith, the president of the Free State, had died from a stroke, leaving them with the loss of two major leaders. W.T. Cosgrave took over leading the Free State with his right-hand man, Kevin O'Higgins. General Richard Mulliky took over Collins' position as the general. While Collins fought to unite the two sides, Cosgrave and O'Higgins had no sympathy for those against the treaty. The Provisional Government became more violent and ruthless, killing many of the anti-treaty Republicans that they captured to try to end the war sooner. On November 27, 1922, 4 high-ranking Republican leaders, including Rory O'Connor, were killed. On November 30th, Liam Lynch enacted the Orders of Frightfulness, which sanctioned the killing of those close to the Free State, and later calling for the destruction of their homes. This started a cycle of violence that cost the lives of many, some of whom were not even involved in the war. Even Eamon de Valera saw this as being counterproductive to Ireland as a whole. On March 26, 1923, a meeting was called between the IRA leaders to vote on ending the war with the Provisional Government. Liam Lynch led the vote to not call a ceasefire, as he thought the Free State was on the verge of collapse. On April 10, 1923, several Republican leaders were in a cabin functioning as a hideout on Knockmeal Down Mountains. They received word that the Free State forces were moving in on them, so they mounted an escape. They ran up the mountains carrying important documents and were chased by a large, well-armed force. Liam Lynch was shot during the exchange and later died from those injuries. The anti-treaty side had lost their general, and any chance for victory had died with him. On April 30th, 1923, just a week after Liam Lynch's death, Frank Aiken, Lynch's replacement and a general who wanted to stay neutral in the war, told the anti-treaty forces to cease all offensive operations. On May 24, 1923, Aiken issued the Dump Arms Order, calling for all anti-treaty forces to put down their weapons, signifying the end of the war. Valera was arrested along with many other anti-treaty supporters after their surrender. The compromise of the two factions came in the form of a ceasefire. During the ceasefire, an agreement was reached between the two factions for how the Free State would be run. Valera was released from prison in July 1924. He abandoned Sinn Féin and created the Fianna Fáil party, bringing most of his constituents with him. The IRA and the remnants of Sinn Féin still fought the treaty, but by the 1930s they parted ways. By 1939, all the clauses in the Anglo-Irish Treaty that caused contention were removed or amended. The Irish Civil War pitted friend against friend and family against family. The tension within the country was at an all-time high. Even after the compromise that was made between the pro-treaty and anti-treaty sides, violence over the Anglo-Irish Treaty persisted. The IRA bombed and terrorized the country for years because in their eyes, the conflict from the 20s was still unresolved. Today, Ireland lives without fear, and while the compromise made after the Irish Civil War didn't completely solve the problem, it began the country's movement to peace, and in time Ireland would no longer be a country at conflict with itself.